There you go. So, we're factoring by grouping in 8.2 here. So if everyone goes to 8.2 in their notes, please and thank you. Short little section here. So here, if we see this, this is all, if we look at this like it's one whole term. If we look at this like it's one whole term. Before, this 3a would have been the GCF of x and 5 of this before. But now we're going to look at this like it's one whole term, and we're going to look at this like it's one whole term. Like it's one big thing. So do these, this one big thing and this one big thing, do they have any things in common? 5. So let's look at it this way. The factors of this whole big thing, one factor is 3a, and the 35. One factor is 3a, and the other factor is x plus 5. These are our two factors of this. They're multiplying together. Factors are two things that multiply together. So these are our two factors of this big part on the left. Our big part on the right, our two factors are going to be this 2 and this x plus 5. Those are the two factors we have. So, of these two factors compared with these two factors, do we notice that they have any of the same factors? What do they have? The x plus 5s are the same. So that's a common factor. And as a matter of fact, it's going to be our greatest common factor. So our GCF here is going to be x plus 5, that whole thing. Because this first part has an x plus 5 as a factor, and this second part has an x plus 5 as a factor.
This is x plus 5?
So, because, thank you. So because 3a is being multiplied with x plus 5, 3a is a factor, x plus 5 is a factor in the first part. Second part, 2 is a factor, x plus 5 is a factor. So they both, this first part here and the second part here, both have x plus 5 as a common factor. And so that's our greatest common factor is x plus 5. So if we take this 3a x plus 5, and we take 3a times x plus 5, and we divide it by our GCF x plus 5, set up our parentheses here. What do we get when we divide this? Can we just divide this x plus 5 and this x plus 5? Yeah. Yes, we can, because these are multiplying. If they were adding together, if it looked like this, could we still just divide those x plus 5s?
No.
No, because that's addition. You have to divide out everything. But here, since it's multiplying, we can simplify those out. And what are we left with?
3a.
3a. So 3a is what will go in our parentheses for the first part. So similar to how we did it before, just kind of doing it on a bigger scale. So 3a will be what's left over after we factor out our GCF of x plus 5. So we do the second one. I'll write it up here to have room. We have negative 2 times x plus 5 divided by x plus 5. So what are we going to have left? Just that negative 2, because the x plus 5 you're going to divide out. So here it's going to be negative 2 in the second parenthesis. So our factors, we end up having all of x plus 5 being multiplied with all of 3a minus 2. That's what we end up getting as a factor. And that would be our answer. Is this right here? That would be our answer. Because the GCF of both of those is x plus 5. I'm going to write that down real quick if you haven't already. So write that down if you haven't already. I'll give you a second. So we'll walk through this kind of the reverse and see what happens. Just to prove that it's the same thing still. Yes.
That's kind of confusing.
You do have to put parentheses around the x plus 5 because there's more than one thing out here as our GCF. Good question.
Is it like wrong if you don't?
Correct. We'll talk about why.
Oh, well, because if there's a plus sign separating two factors, then it is saying basically that you're only doing 5 to everything. It just isn't.
So Ben kind on the head here. If we have this, I'm going to rewrite this here. I do not want you to write this here. If we didn't have the parentheses around there, what would be multiplied to everything inside this parentheses? Just the 5. But if we have the x around here, do we have to FOIL this now?
Yeah.
Where we do the x to everything as well, and the 5 to everything? And would those be two very different things?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. So if we FOILed it, we'd have x times 3a, which would be 3ax. X times negative 2, which would be negative 2x. 5 times 3a, 15a. And 5 times negative 2, negative 10a. And that's what we'd end up getting.
Wait, negative 10a? You're just doing 5 times
Negative 10. Thank you. Negative 10. And if we were to have taken this problem originally, once again, I don't want you writing this, just following along. If we would have taken that original problem, and we would have distributed this back in, we get negative 3ax, negative 15a, negative 2x, and negative 10. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
One of those should have been negative.
The 2 and the 15. It's not negative 3.
It was a positive 3, wasn't it? Thank you.
Yes, it's
So this is a positive 3, so that's a positive 3. So this is a positive 3ax, thank you, and a positive 15a. Thank you. So just that last step, I wrote that wrong. So did we end up getting the same thing except for the 15a and the negative 2x are flip-flopped? And which one should actually come first? ax, and then which should come after that? And then 15a is alphabetical. So now are those the same if we write this in our standard form? Yeah. So we got the same thing after we factored and multiplied through, or if we just multiplied through. So that means mathematically, this factored version is the same thing as this. It's the same thing. And now I think this looks a little cleaned up compared to this. I think this looks a little more cleaned up in our circle than compared to what we started with. Now, we'll talk about the same idea here. We'll look through this again on number 2. And then we'll look through some methods of how we can do this, but it's not set up that way. But before I erase this, question on how this is mathematically the same. Number 1. Okay, make sure we're following along. Let's see, you didn't have to write that part down. Bless you, must write down afterwards, we forget. Okay, so if we look at number 2, if we look at this whole first part, this 2x and a minus 3, and this whole second part, y and a minus 3, what do these have in common?
A minus 3.
The a minus 3 is being multiplied in both those. It's a factor in each of these. Because this is 2x times all of a minus 3. This is y times all of a minus 3. So they have in common that a minus 3. So we're going to put that in front of our parentheses. And since it's 2 terms, we have to put that parenthesis around it itself. And we'll take this first thing. 2x times a minus 3 divided by a minus 3. What happens with those a minus 3 since there's multiplication? They divide out, what are we left with? Just 2x over 1 or 2x?
Could you just think of it like when you take the a minus 3 away, all you're left with is 2x?
Yeah. Yep, you can think of it that way. That's what we're doing, is we're dividing it, and that's how the division works. Is you take it away.
So eventually you can take the shortcut and just write it down.
As long as you catch it. And then we have a plus sign, and then we'll have y times a minus 3 divided by our GCF of a minus 3. What happens with these a minus 3s?
Cancel.
Divide out, and we're left with y. So this ends up being our answer. It's the a minus 3, the quantity of a minus 3 times the quantity of 2x plus y. We say quantity to make sure we're saying, oh, all of this is being multiplied with this. Questions on those two? If you have one, please ask. This idea of taking the GCF out of both of these is very important.
How did you get 2x
So when we took this, we divided out a minus 3 from it. Yep, we took our GCF out of that whole first term. Yep. Because instead of calling this one term and two terms inside the parentheses, we're calling this whole thing just one term. Okay? So, now we'll learn this thing where we have 4 terms. If we have 4 terms, that means we have 3 plus or minus signs in between them, 4 terms. Like here, right below, 4ab plus 3a plus ab plus 6. Are these 4 different terms? Yes, they are. None of them are like terms. They can't be combined. We'll put them in groups of 2. So how many groups would that be if you put them in groups of 2? 2, okay? And then we'll look for a greatest common factor. So, how this would work is kind of walk through here. You take 4ab plus 3a, and you put these first 2 in a group, like this. And then you put the last 2 in a group. And we'll usually put that sign in with that third one. We'll take the sign with it. And look at why. And so these groups would be like this. The first 2 and the last 2. And then we say, okay, now in this first set of parentheses, what do these have in common? They both have an A. So that A was taken out. It is factored out. So it's just 4b and 3. Take your head up. In the second parenthesis, what do 8b and 6 have in common? They can both be divided by 2, so we'll take out a 2 of these 2 and be left with 4b and 3. So we look for the greatest common factor of the first set and the greatest common factor of the second set. Do the greatest common factors of each had to be the same? No, this one was A, this one was 2. But what do we notice now about the parentheses? This 4b plus 3 and this 4b plus 3.
Oh, they're the same.
They're the same. So now is this step, right here where my arrow is pointing, is that very similar to these first 2 problems we had?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what can we do with this 4b plus 3?
Use it as our
You-
GCF.
Use it as our GCF. So it's put to the front here in parentheses. And if you take A times 4b plus 3 and divide 4b plus 3, you're left with A. And if you take this 2, 4b plus 3, and divide out that 4b plus 3, what are you left with? Just 2. And that's how you get this answer. Is that pretty similar to what we had? What step did we really add in here? The grouping to start with, which is why we call it factoring by grouping. It's because we added in some grouping there. Questions on that? Okay, we're going to practice this here real quick. Dang. Okay, so let's flip the page to example 1. So, how many different terms do we have here? 4. We have 4 terms. So what are we going to do when we have 4 terms? Put them in groups of 2. So the first 2, and we'll take this sign with that second parenthesis. We'll take that negative sign with that parenthesis. It's a good habit for us to get into. And we say, okay, in this first parenthesis, 15a minus 3ab, what is the GCF of this first parenthesis? 3, 3a. Does this one have a b?
Oh, no.
No. So what's 15a divided by 3a? Just 5. What's negative 3ab divided by 3a? Negative b. 3 divided by 3 is 1. A divided by a is 1. B is by itself, so negative b. Then we look at this one, and what's our GCF here? Our GCF. Go ahead. Negative 4. Why do you say negative 4? Because we want this first part to be positive, and it's currently negative. So let's try taking a negative 4 here. So what's negative 4b divided by negative 4? Just positive b now. What's 20 divided by negative 4? Negative 5. Now, what do we notice about inside our parentheses?
Wait, why?
Okay,
They're flipping.
It's the same thing, so you just group them together.
they're close to the same thing, but are they quite the same thing? No. Okay, we'll have to do a reordering step then. So let's look at this. We'll leave the first one the same. And if we put these into different order, which would come first?
The 5.
The negative 5 plus b. Now, are these the same? Okay, what can we do to make this the same? Okay. Change these signs. So if we take out a negative again, we'll change all the signs. We'll talk about that. So Do we have the same thing in each of the parentheses? So that's our new greatest common factor. So we'll put our greatest common factor in the front. That's 5 minus b. And what's left over from this first part? 3a. And what's left over from the second part? Is plus 4. And those would be our two factors. Those would be our two factors.
Where did you get that 3A from? Because wasn't it?
Okay, so confused. What's up?
I don't know. You know how it's really quick.
Right? Let's walk through it a little bit slower. Yeah. So we have 15a minus 3b minus 4b plus 20. Our first step is to group them in groups of 2. Okay? Our first step is to group them in groups of 2. So we do that and we say, okay, in this first group, what's our GCF? Well, you notice that 3 can go into 15 and 3. And we notice they both have an A. So 3a is our GCF. So we take a 3a out of both of those, we're left with 5 minus b. Does that part make sense, Grace?
Yeah.
Okay. So the second parenthesis, we take out a negative 4 to make that b positive. And we're left with negative 4 outside minus b minus 5 inside. So then, we said, oh, we have to reorder the second parenthesis though, because we want the same exact thing inside the parentheses for this to work.
We're on the second one right now?
No, on this part.
Wait, what?
So we look at the second set of parentheses here, and we say, well, we want the same exact thing in the parentheses. Right now, it's not quite the same exact thing. It's close. We still have a 5, a b, and a minus sign, but they're in a different order. So we change the order around here. We just write everything the same, but we change the order. We put the 5 first and the b second. So it's negative b plus 5, or negative 5 plus b, excuse me. Then we said, well, are these signs the same now? No, so we need to change that. Now let me talk about something here that we might have been able to do differently. I don't want you to write this part down, but I want you to look at this. Is this in the right order right now? Is that in our standard form? No. What should be switched around? This AB should be first for our standard form. They both have an A, so we should put the one with the other variable first. Once again, don't write this down. So if I written negative 3AB plus 15A minus 4B plus 20, and we write it in standard form first and then group it, that might help us out. I'm going to look for it. Because now what's the greatest common factor of these two? Nope.
12b.
Nope. Greatest common factor. What goes into 3 and 15?
Oh,
3. But this time we want negative. Why do you want negative here, Josh? Because we want this to be positive. So we take a negative 3a out, and we're left with b minus 5. And the reason this will help us here is this second parenthesis, is it still the same as the second parenthesis was up here if we look up here right now? Everyone look up here right now. Is this second parenthesis in the blue the same as this second parenthesis up here? Negative 4b plus 20, negative 4b plus 20. So we're still going to factor out that same thing, negative 4, and we're left with b minus 5. Now what do we notice about our parentheses? Now they're their exact same. So do we have to do that flipping around stuff? No, because we did it at the beginning. Was it easier for us to flip it around at the beginning than in the middle? Yes, something to look for. Make sure they're in standard form. So then you can say, oh, these both have a b minus 5 in common. So we'll factor out the GCF of these. We're left with a negative 3a in that first set and a negative 4 in the second set. And that would be our answer. Oh, did anybody hear that ankle pop I just had?
Look how dark
It is very dark.
It's just thundering.
On the first,
Really?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going back to the first one,
Yeah.
because I just finally figured out everything, and just so like, I was ready.
Guys, Grace is asking a question.
So I ended up with 3a, and then in parentheses, 5 minus 1b, which I get that yours was like
Yep.
extra. And then end parentheses, minus 4, in
Yep.
parentheses, 1b minus 5.
Okay, yes.
So I don't,
So that's what we had here, right
Okay.
here, in this step. See
and
where
I
that
have to
is?
make it positive.
And then we said, well, is this the same thing as this? Close, but we needed to rearrange it. So we had to flip it around and make it negative 5 plus b. And we said, well, this 5 is supposed to be positive and the b is supposed to be negative. So we we had to change the signs of all of the second part to make that work.
Got it.
Okay. So here on number 2, what do we do with these 4 things? Would we want to reorder it first?
Yeah.
Probably. What would go first here?
Minus
Do not pack up yet. Then what would you do? Group them. First 2, what do we do with the sign? Where does this go? Keep it with the 8D. And then we look for greatest common factors, correct? Write down what the greatest common factor would be for each of those and write it and start factoring that. Because what can go into both 2CD and C? C, what kind of C? Why do we say negative C? Because we want this to be positive. So we end up getting a positive 2D minus, what's C divided by negative C? 1. Here we'll take out a negative 4, we're left with 2D minus 1. Is that the same thing in each parenthesis? Okay, so we take out a 2D minus 1.
Is there supposed to be a parenthesis in between the C and the 2 on the little thing?
Where? Here?
Like right there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, you're right.
I thought it
And
was
so,
like,
you're right.
I thought it was like just negative.
So now this is negative C minus 4. Okay. I want you to work on this over break. Okay. Now you may pack up. Now what happens if maybe this was too fast right here? What can you do? Watch this part of the video again. Was this a super long part of the video? No, you might only need to watch 5 minutes of it to understand it again. Yes. Have a great day, everybody.
I thought it was
Have a
so
great
easy
weekend.
until you actually listen to the hard stuff and then it's like back to being super hard. And then
Bob.
and then smacks you in the face with stuff that's actually
Psych.
hard.
He's playing ya. Continuing on with this lesson. Let's do number 3 and 4 as well. So for number 3, when we have these grouped together, this one in green. When we have these grouped together here, well, these 4 terms, different terms. So this has the power of 3, power of 2, power of 1, and no n. So they're all different terms. We group the first 2 together here. We group the last 2 together, being careful to take this sign right here with that third term. And then what we do here is we look at what the GCF of these first 2 terms would be. So look at just the numbers. Well, we can see that we can have a 5 in both of these. And then our n's, we're able to take n squared out because this has n to the third, n to the second, so our lowest one is n squared. So we take 5n to the third divided by 5n squared, we're just left with n. And when we take 20n squared divided by 5n squared, well, 20 divided by 5 will be 4, and n squared divided by n squared is just 1, so it ends up just being that 4 times 1, or 4. In the second set of parentheses, we see, well, 4n and 16, they can both be divisible by 4. So we'll put the positive 4 out there. 4n divided by that 4 is n, and 16 divided by that 4 is 4. And now if we look inside of these 2 new sets of parentheses that we created, we see n plus 4 and n plus 4. We see the same thing. So this is just like a little bit earlier in notes when we started off this section, where n plus 4 becomes our new greatest common factor. So we put our new greatest common factor out in front, and we say, okay, well, if we take this whole first part here that I'm circling right now, 5n squared times n plus 4, and divide n plus 4, we're left only with that 5n squared, because these are multiplying together, so we're able just to kind of divide those out. In the second set of parentheses, we do the same thing. We take this whole thing, the 4 times n squared, or n plus 4, so we 4 times n plus 4, and divide it by n plus 4, and we're left with only that plus 4. And these 2 parentheses and even parentheses around those first 2 end up being our answer after we group them together. And if we go on to our last one, once again we have 4 terms here. And unlike our first two, this one's already in standard form, just like our third one. This third and fourth one are already in our standard form. We don't have to change anything around because we have x, y, and just no variable. Remember when there's a tie between the x and the x, we can say, okay, whichever one has the other variable goes first. So since we have 4 terms, we'll group the first two, group the second two, but make sure to take this sign with that. So look at this 2xy and positive 7x. You might look at that and say, well, there's nothing in common, but they still have that x in common. So we'll be left with 2y plus 7 once we divide 2xy by x and 7x by x. In the second parenthesis, we say, okay, well, we don't want this to be negative here. We don't want this first one in this parenthesis to be negative. So we need to factor out a negative. We know that. And then, do they have anything else in common? No, they don't. So what is called a negative 1? Because if we take negative 2y divided by negative 1, well, it's just going to be positive 2y. Because anytime you divide something by 1, you just get itself. And the negative just changes that sign for us. So it's going to be 2y, and then this negative 7 just becomes a positive 7. And now if we look inside the parentheses, we'll notice, hey, look, once again, we have the same thing, 2y plus 7 and 2y plus 7 in these two new sets of parentheses that we created. So we can go from here and we can say, well, this is going to be our new greatest common factor since this whole first thing, this whole first product, these two factors multiplied together has a factor of 2y plus 7, and the whole second product has a factor of 2y plus 7. That's our new greatest common factor. Put that in parentheses because it's 2 terms, more than 1 term, so we put this in this parentheses. And then once we divide this first term, we are just left with x. The second term, we're just left with negative 1. And that would be our answer.